Welcome to my 4-part series on how to do drag makeup. I'll be showing each step and the products used on screen at all times during the videos. And be sure to watch all 4 videos to see the full transformation. So, we've blocked our brows, color corrected the beard and sideburns. We're going back to the primer, and now we're going to apply that all over our face and neck. So when you're doing the areas that don't have any powder or anything on them yet, you can pretty much just apply this smoothly. Over the areas that were color corrected or have powder, I tend to do sort of a patting motion so that I'm not wiping it off. You also want to do over your eyelids, basically your entire face and neck, so don't leave anything unprimed. Then I'm extra careful about the brows because I don't want to undo any of the hard work that we just put into getting them flat. And you may be able to tell, as I mentioned, you can still see the brows. This does not make them invisible. It just makes them flat and easier to treat like skin. All right, now it is time to apply foundation. So I use Krylon TV paint sticks. I highly recommend them. They are a bit expensive. There's basically 3 brands that you want to consider if you're going to do a foundation stick. They would be Meron, which would be on the cheaper end, probably about $10 to $15 for a stick. Krylon is about $25 per stick, and then Dermablend is like $30 or $40, and they're actually also smaller. So I have one example of a Dermablend stick. You can see it's smaller. I like Krylon. I think that it's better than Meron and worth the extra cost, but I don't think there's a big enough difference with Dermablend to justify spending more. And this is just what a Meron stick would look like, similar size. We're going to do our highlight, foundation, and contour creams. I like to do a cream and powder contour, and I always start with the highlight. Other people do this differently, and they apply foundation all over their face first, and then they add some highlight on top or contour on top. What I like to do is not really waste the makeup and just do the relevant areas. There are a number of ways you can get contour makeup. So I just use multiple Krylon sticks. So I bought one in OB2 for my main foundation, then I have one in Ivory for the highlight, and FS33 for the darker contour. However, I think you still need a foundation base, but you could get something like one of these contour sticks that has a dark color on one end and a lighter color on the other end, and use that. That might be a good idea if you're a little bit more on a budget. Another thing that might be good to try, particularly if you're new, this is what I started using the first time I contoured, was this cream contour kit, which actually has 6 different options. So this allowed me to kind of figure out which of the darker colors in particular worked best for me. So this is a good way to also get started and kind of figure out what works for you, because it has multiple options. I, however, am going to use all Krylon sticks today. So I'm going to start with my highlight color, which is Ivory, and I'm going to apply this along the top of my cheekbone, kind of going up a little bit beside the eye as well, over the top of my lip, a little bit on the chin. I'm going to do my nose. And you don't have to cover every square inch with this, because when you blend it out, it will spread out a bit more. And then I'm also going to do the insides of my brow bone up into the center of my forehead. It's pretty good. It will look very strange in the intermediate steps here. Then I take my OB2 foundation stick. By the way, Ivory is pretty much the lightest you can get before going pure white, at least with Krylon. I use pure white actually when I am doing more dramatic looks, but this time we're going for something a little more normal. So I'm applying the foundation stick everywhere, The only area where I don't really need to get super thorough with that is the very edges of my hairline. Hopefully you can start to see how the brow does eventually disappear. And don't forget to bring this down your neck and a little bit behind your ears. I'm also going to do just a little swipe under the eye, so that'll make the cheek bone area kind of pop a little bit forward more, because I have very flat cheeks, so I want to give an illusion of a little bit more roundness there. Next up, you take your beauty blender. So if you haven't used one of these before, they come in different shapes and sizes. What you want to do for first time use is get it soaking wet. It'll grow up in size a little bit, and then squeeze out as much of the water as you can. And then you can start using it to blend out your makeup. So I've already used this, so that first part is ready to go. And because this is kind of a two-sided beauty blender, I use the smaller side of it to focus just on the highlight area, and then the wider side to focus on the regular foundation color and where it blends into the highlighter. So just tap this out, starting with the highlight. Make sure to get around your nose. I don't try to contour my nose with the creams because I find that it's just too imprecise, so I just go with the highlight all over the nose, and then we'll come back later with contour powders to turn that into a lovely little pinched nose. One other thing I suggest is having some makeup wipes nearby and pulling one out, which you should be able to just reuse one the whole time to wipe your fingers off as you're going along, and keep that towel you had earlier handy to dry it off after. That way you aren't accidentally spreading makeup over areas that you've carefully covered already. All right, now it is time for the contour creams. So this is my contour color. It's FS33, it's a bit darker. And because I covered my sideburns, I'm starting there, basically putting this all over the sideburns, the upper temples, a little bit along the edge of the hairline. By the way, you could certainly use a hairnet when doing this if you want to hold your hair back. I don't, mostly because I don't want to accidentally start sweating on my head, because I sweat profusely. Actually, contouring the cheek area is where you are going to vary. Contouring the cheek area is where you're going to have a lot of variation based on your particular face. So as I said, I have flatter, high cheekbones, so I don't want to do a line all the way to my mouth, because what that's going to do is just make me look very sort of cavernous, and that will make me look more masculine than feminine. When we're doing this particular drag look, we are aiming for something more feminine. So I just do a little bit that goes down the side, so I'm kind of implying a roundness. And then I also do along the jawline. And I bring that down a little bit to get to the Adam's apple. And we'll blend that out in a second. Some people also put it under their lip. I don't really think that helps that much for me. But the idea there is that you're making your lip look a little more plump. One thing that I do, because I have a really prominent jaw, and also because I want to make the sides of my head look a little less wide now that I've covered my sideburns, is I take an even darker brown. And you can use, this is a Maron stick, you could also use this Stelio, the brown here, for this. And again, not everybody has to do this depending on your face shape, but my jaw is so big on the corners that I want to sort of chop it off a little bit. And the other thing I want to do is make a weird face, because you will see that this will actually not completely cover depending on how you're talking. So if I go like, you can see that some skin below that shows up. So I make sure to cover that as well. And then, as I said, I just do a little bit on the sideburn area. Now that I've applied my cream contour, I actually have a different beauty blender that I use for the contour. And I'm going to start with the lightest areas, particularly the cheeks. Again, I'm just tapping. Once I've got those lighter areas, I'm going to go to where I put the darker brown. I'm extra careful along this line. I actually don't want it to be super blended in. I want it to have some definition there, but I also don't want it to look completely just drawn on. All right, your face should now start to have some shape to it. You're still gonna look like a freaky alien. This is also where I'm gonna use my wipe again to get a little bit of this excess off my fingers. And I'm actually gonna go back in under that jaw contour with the lighter beauty blender to just define that ever so slightly better. And then also use that to blend up the edges of the highlight back into the contour there. So, we're looking good. Now it is time to set and bake. So, get out that trusty neutral setting powder again, and your puff, and now you're gonna apply this first to all the areas of your face that has highlight. Now you use the neutral in those areas because you don't want to darken that, you want to keep it lighter. The one product I have that is just regular old CoverGirl that is useful is this Clean Professional Loose Powder. So it's translucent, it's a beige color, it's labeled 110. I assume that's the color. And I'm going to use that for the rest of my face where I had the regular foundation and contour. So this will set it, but also add just a little bit of pigment to it. Also put this all over your neck. I find that this really helps smooth out some of that foundation and contouring. And you start to get that kind of airbrushed look, which is always kind of amazing to me that you can do that to your own face. All right, at this stage you're covered with powder, and this is what they call baking. So you can leave this on for a little bit if you have something else you need to do, get another drink or whatever to help it sort of settle in, or you could immediately jump to the next step. Okay, now that you've baked for a minute, you can take the same brush you've been using to dust off excess powder and do that whole thing again. I start with the lighter areas first, though I don't think it really matters. And while I'm doing this, just a reminder about the whole reason you're doing contouring is to emphasize or de-emphasize certain parts of your face. So when doing drag, what you typically want to do is make your eyes and cheeks seem larger and make your nose, forehead, and jaw seem smaller. So by putting a lot of light around the eyes and cheeks, you are giving them more attention. And then by using the contour under your cheeks, along your jawline, and around the top, you're making that stuff recede so that you end up with a face that looks a little more feminine in proportion. All right, now that we've done the cream contour and set it, I also do a powder contour on top of that. A lot of people do one or the other. I find that, particularly since I got a lot of face to chisel away at, that I like to do both, and I think that you overall look a little smoother. I've been liking this Profusion blush and bronzer kit. I don't know anything about brands, so I have no idea if that's like a brand that people like or reputable or whatever. But what I like about it is that it has a nice mix of blushes and different shadows, a couple of which have shimmer to them, and it came with a few brushes. So in addition to that, I use a little bit of Ben Nye Super White. You might hear it called Clown White. because I'm very light skinned, I use just a little bit of that to like re-emphasize some of the highlight areas, mostly along the cheekbone here. And then some just in the center there of my forehead. Then when it comes to the contour powder, I mentioned that there's a couple of shimmery ones. I start with the lighter one of those. I just apply the shimmery ones to the cheek area because I don't really want shimmery, shiny stuff all along my forehead and jaw because that will just bring more attention to it, but your cheeks could look nice and shimmery. And then there are two flat matte shades of brown here. I start with the lighter one and bring that over the cheeks as well. And then I'm also going to be taking that everywhere else that I was applying that contour in the cream stage, including along the jawline. And then the very darkest brown, kind of reserved for those couple of areas where I put the really dark brown cream as well. So along the jawline here, and then all through that sideburn area and up into the temples. I also tend to go back and forth between the highlight and contour a little bit to make sure I'm getting the colors and shapes I want. So in this case, I want to have a little bit more of that highlight go around the corners of my eyes so that there's more of a pull upwards to the face there. At this point, the next thing I do is the contour for the nose. So this is very challenging. You will likely need a lot of attempts over time to figure out how you want to do this, particularly since every nose is very different. So I am taking the same lighter matte brown of my blush and contour kit, and what I'm going to do is draw two lines. I'm drawing two lines going down the center of my nose, leading to the tip of the nose, that slowly narrow together as you get closer to the end of the nose. And I'm also making sure that that gets kind of blended up into the eye area near where your brow will start. You don't want to go too crazy with adding lots of dark contour here because you may just end up drawing more attention to your nose than if you had just left it uncontoured. So once you get to the tip, the way that I am doing this is to kind of come to a more sharp tip to the nose. Not like Magnolia Crawford sharp, but sharp. Also at the tip of the nose, you can apply a little bit of that darker brown. And I want the outer edge of this to blend ever so slightly, but in terms of where it blends down the center, I do want to have a mostly sharpish line. I also have two spots on the bridge of my nose that kind of stick out a little bit extra, so I tend to put a little bit more of the shadow in that area and just blend it up to where the eyes are. So you should be starting to see the implication of a narrower nose. Then I am going to use a smaller brush now than I did before with the white powder, and I am going to kind of draw line down the center. I want the lightest part to be towards the very tip, but I do want it to come all the way up. I will also use my finger at times if I want to just blend without getting more product on there. And like most areas, you may have to go back and forth between the dark and light. So in this case, I'm going to bring back the dark a little bit. You also want to take a little bit of the white and on the outside sort of bridge area of your nose, bring that in so that you are further emphasizing a kind of pinched look to it. And I actually will sometimes bring the white further down so you get more of that line. Some people go further and actually reapply white cream over this and leave it unblended. That can look really cool too. This is a little bit more of a attempting to be moderately realistic looking. So you've got your nose. It looks pretty good. And then while we have our palette open, because it had the blush in it, I am going to take the blush colors and I'm going to start with just a lighter pink and just kind of gently bring a little bit of color along the cheek. I do bring it into the center of the face a little bit more than I did bring the contour. I recommend also applying blush along the edges of your face, sort of to go along with the contour. This brings a little more warmth and color and life into your face. I also do just a smidge on the tip of the nose. You're still probably looking pretty weird at this point, but you've got most of the basis now for all the other fun stuff.
Thanks for watching part 2 in my 4-part series on how to do drag makeup. Be sure to follow me on Instagram and make sure to keep watching with video 3, eyebrows and eyeshadow.